My name is Sergeant Elias Vance, and for 20 years, the rhythmic beat of a soldier's life was the only cadence I truly knew. From the moment I first laced up my standard-issue boots, still a boy trying to fill a man's shadow, the Army became my world, my family, my undeniable purpose. I wasn't one for deep philosophical musings. My faith, such as it was a sturdy, unquestioned thing, like the Kevlar vest I strapped on before every patrol. It was there, a background hum of belief in something greater, something that watched over us as we walked through the valley of the shadow. I prayed, yes, mostly quick, fervent pleas in the heat of battle or quiet words of gratitude when we returned, one more mission etched into the tally of our survival. But the intricacies of doctrine, the deep dives into scripture, those were for chaplains and men with softer hands. My hands were calloused, trained to hold a rifle, to build, to break, to protect. My understanding of good and evil was stark, defined by the lines drawn in the sand, the orders given, the enemy in my sights. There was a clarity in that, a brutal simplicity that the complexities of civilian life seemed to lack. We were the good guys, fighting for freedom, for those who couldn't fight for themselves. That was the narrative, and I clung to it, because to question it too deeply was to invite a kind of chaos I wasn't equipped to handle. The camaraderie was real, a bond forged in shared hardship, and the constant, unspoken understanding that any one of us might not make it back. We were brothers, sisters, a tribe unto ourselves, and my loyalty to my unit, to the men and women beside me, was absolute. That, in many ways, was my most tangible faith. Yet, in the quiet hours, when the generators hummed and the desert night stretched out, vast and indifferent, sometimes a sliver of unease would find its way in. Looking up at a sky dusted with more stars than I'd ever imagined, I'd feel a smallness, a sense of being a tiny cog in a vast, incomprehensible machine. What was it all truly for? Were our sacrifices, the lives lost, the innocence shattered, truly tipping the scales toward some greater good, or were we just perpetuating a cycle as old as humanity itself? I'd push those thoughts away, labeling them as fatigue, as the kind of introspection that had no place on the front lines. My job was to be focused, to be strong, to lead. Doubt was a weakness, a crack in the armor, and I couldn't afford it. I believed in duty, in honor, in the mission. That was my trinity, and it had served me well, or so I thought. The upcoming deployment was touted as a critical one, a push into a region that had long been a hornet's nest. The briefings were intense, the intelligence grim. We knew it would be tough, but that was our bread and butter. We trained relentlessly, our bodies and minds honed for the task ahead. I remember checking my gear one last time, the familiar weight of it, the scent of oil and sweat and something uniquely military. I looked at the faces of my squad, young men, most of them, their eyes a mixture of apprehension and that youthful bravado that always pricked at my conscience. I was responsible for them, for bringing them home. That weight was heavier than any rucksack. My faith, then, was a pragmatic thing, a belief that if we did our jobs, if we stayed alert, if we looked out for each other, we'd have a fighting chance. God, in my understanding, helped those who helped themselves. He was a distant commander, perhaps, overseeing the grand strategy, but the tactical decisions, the life and death choices on the ground, those felt very much like they were ours alone. Little did I know that my entire understanding of faith, of life, of the very fabric of reality, was about to be ripped apart and rewoven in a way I could never have conceived, not in my wildest dreams or my darkest nightmares. The desert air was already beginning to shimmer with heat as our convoy rumbled out of the forward operating base, a line of armored vehicles kicking up a plume of fine, talcum-like dust that hung in the air like a persistent ghost. The tension inside our vehicle was palpable, a tight coil of anticipation and unspoken fears. We'd been over the mission parameters a dozen times: secure a small, contested village, root out insurgent elements, and establish a foothold for follow-on forces. Standard operating procedure, if anything in a war zone could ever be called standard. I ran a final check on my communications gear, my eyes scanning the faces of my team. Corporal Miller, barely out of his teens, was nervously tapping his rifle stock. Private Chen, usually quick with a joke, stared blankly out of the reinforced window. I gave them what I hoped was a reassuring nod. Stay sharp, listen to your training, watch each other's backs. We do this right, we all go home. The words felt hollow even to me, a rote recitation of the soldier's creed. The truth was, there were no guarantees in this game, only probabilities. And sometimes, the probabilities were stacked against you. As we approached the village, the familiar landscape of mud brick compounds and sparse, sun-baked vegetation unfolded. It looked deceptively peaceful, but we knew better. This was an area where the enemy had proven to be deeply entrenched, masters of asymmetric warfare. The first sign of trouble came not as a bang, but as a chilling silence. The usual sounds of village life, distant voices, the braying of a donkey, the chatter of children, were absent. It was an unnatural quiet that set every nerve on edge. Eyes open, I radioed, "Something's not right." We dismounted, fanning out, our weapons at the ready, the oppressive heat already causing sweat to slick our palms. The village streets were narrow, winding, offering 1,000 potential ambush points. Each doorway, each rooftop, each darkened alleyway felt like a threat. We moved slowly, methodically, clearing compounds one by one. The silence persisted, broken only by our own footsteps and the crackle of the comms. It was a nerve-wracking game of cat and mouse, but who was the cat and who was the mouse was yet to be determined. Then, all hell broke loose. A sudden, deafening explosion ripped through the air to our left, sending a shockwave that threw us off our feet. Dust and debris rained down, the acrid smell of explosives stinging my nostrils. Before the ringing in my ears had even subsided, the distinctive crackle of automatic rifle fire erupted from multiple directions. "Contact front, contact right." The shouts were immediate, disciplined, as my team reacted, seeking cover, returning fire. The quiet village had transformed into a kill zone. Adrenaline surged through me, a cold, clear rush that sharpened my senses. Training took over. I barked orders, coordinating fire, trying to identify the enemy positions. They were well hidden, using the labyrinthine layout of the village to their advantage. Bullets whizzed past, thudding into the mud walls around us, kicking up angry spurts of dust. We were pinned down, taking heavy fire. Miller went down, a cry of pain cut short. "Man down!" Chen yelled, dragging Miller behind the meager cover of a low wall. I laid down, suppressing fire, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. We had to move, to break out of this kill box. I saw a narrow alleyway that might offer a flanking route. "Chen, cover me. Rest of you on my signal." We moved to that alley. I could feel the heat of the sun, the grit in my teeth, the sting of sweat in my eyes. The world had shrunk to this one horrifying, intense moment. I took a deep breath, a silent prayer on my lips. Not for myself, but for my men. Go, go, go. I roared, breaking cover, sprinting towards the alley, bullets snapping around me like angry insects. I felt a searing pain in my leg, stumbled, but kept going. The alley. We had to make it to the alley. Just as I reached the entrance, a figure emerged from a doorway, weapon raised. There was no time to think, only to react. I brought my rifle up, but he was faster. A blinding flash, a sensation like being hit by a freight train in the chest. And then, nothing. The world dissolved into an unbearable, crushing pressure. And then, a profound, infinite blackness. There was no sound, no light, no pain, just a complete and utter void. My last conscious thought was not of the mission, or the enemy, or even my own life, but a fleeting, desperate image of my men, their faces strained, caught in the crossfire. And then I was gone, or so it seemed, tumbling into an abyss from which I was certain there would be no return. leaving behind the cacophony of battle for a silence that was absolute and terrifyingly final. The blackness was total, an absence of everything I had ever known. It wasn't just dark, it was a void, a negation of light, sound, sensation. For a period that felt like an eternity, yet had no measure, I simply existed within this nothingness. There was no thought, no fear, just a profound sense of cessation. Then, slowly, subtly, a change began. It wasn't a return of sight or hearing in the conventional sense, but an awareness, a faint stirring of consciousness in that vast emptiness. I felt light, not physically, but as if I myself was becoming less dense, less anchored to the oppressive void. There was a sensation of movement, a gentle, upward drift, like a diver slowly ascending from an immeasurable depth. The oppressive weight of the blackness began to recede, replaced by a strange ethereal buoyancy. And then I could see, but what I saw was not what I expected. I was no longer in the alleyway, nor was I in the crushing darkness. I was above, looking down. Below me lay the scene of the firefight, the narrow, dusty streets of the village, the mud-brick compounds. It was like watching a film, detached, strangely serene. I saw the chaos, the smoke, the figures of soldiers moving, taking cover, returning fire. And there, sprawled awkwardly at the mouth of the alley, was a body, my body. I recognized the uniform, the gear, the way my helmet had been knocked askew. There was a dark stain spreading on the chest. It was undeniably me, yet I felt no connection to it, no ownership. It was like looking at a discarded uniform, an empty shell. The Elias Vance who had charged into that alley was down there, lifeless. The Elias Vance who was observing this scene was somewhere else. Somewhere new. I should have been horrified, panicked, consumed by grief or terror, but I wasn't. Instead, a profound, almost shocking calmness washed over me. The pain was gone. The fear was gone. The adrenaline, the desperation of combat, all of it had vanished, replaced by this quiet, observant detachment. I tried to understand what was happening. Was I a ghost? A spirit? The concepts felt flimsy, inadequate to describe this state of being. I had no physical form that I could perceive, yet I was undeniably present, aware. The sounds of battle reached me, but they were muffled, distant, like echoes from another world. The urgency, the life-or-death struggle that had consumed me moments before, now seemed almost insignificant from this vantage point. I saw my teammates, Chen and the others, still fighting, their faces grim. I saw medics rushing towards my fallen form. I felt a pang, not of personal loss, but of concern for them, for their safety. I wanted to tell them I was all right, in a strange way, but I had no voice, no means to communicate. As I watched, the immediate vicinity around my physical body began to feel different. The air itself seemed to shimmer, and a coldness began to emanate from the shadows of the buildings, a palpable chill that had nothing to do with the desert temperature. The muted sounds of combat seemed to recede further, replaced by a low, unsettling hum. From the periphery of my awareness, dark, ill-defined shapes began to coalesce in the shadowy corners of the village, forms that seemed to writhe and shift like heat haze over asphalt. Yet they were cold, utterly devoid of warmth or light. They weren't physical beings, not in the way the soldiers were, but they possessed a definite presence, an intelligence that felt ancient and malevolent. They seemed drawn to the chaos, to the violence, to the very spot where my body lay. A primal fear, something deeper than the fear of bullets or bombs, began to stir within me. These were not enemies I could fight with a rifle. They felt like the embodiment of the hatred and despair that fueled the conflict below. As these shadowy entities drifted closer, their presence becoming more oppressive, I felt an instinctive urge to recoil, to flee, but I was anchored, an observer tethered to this strange, disembodied state. The calm I had experienced earlier was eroding, replaced by a growing unease, a sense of being exposed to something profoundly unnatural and dangerous. Just as the nearest of these dark forms seemed to reach out, its shadowy tendrils extending towards the spiritual space I occupied, a new sensation pierced through the gloom. It started as a pinprick, a tiny spark in the vast distance, but it was a light unlike any I had ever seen. It wasn't the harsh glare of the sun or the artificial beam of a flashlight. This light was alive. It pulsed with a warmth that began to push back the encroaching cold, a gentle yet irresistible power. The shadowy entities hesitated, then recoiled, visibly shying away from this nascent radiance as if it were anathema to them. The light grew, expanding steadily, not in a blinding explosion, but in a soft, pervasive bloom that filled my awareness. It was incredibly bright, yet it didn't hurt to perceive. It was a light that felt like love, like peace, like coming home after a long and brutal journey. An indescribable sense of relief washed over me, so profound it was almost overwhelming. The fear dissipated, replaced by an incredible sense of safety and an irresistible pull towards this luminous, beckoning presence. The battlefield below my body, the shadowy figures, all began to fade into insignificance as I was drawn, gently but inexorably, towards the heart of this magnificent, welcoming light. The light was all-encompassing, a boundless ocean of warmth and serenity. As I was drawn deeper into its embrace, the last vestiges of the earthly realm, the sounds of combat, the sight of my fallen form, receded like a distant dream. There was no sense of travel, no perception of distance covered, only a continuous immersion into this radiant presence. It wasn't just a visual phenomenon. I could feel it, as if the light itself was made of pure, unconditional love, seeping into the very core of my being, healing wounds I hadn't even known I carried. The peace was absolute, a stillness so profound that it quieted every fear, every question, every lingering echo of the turmoil I had left behind. Within this incredible luminosity, a distinct form began to coalesce, or rather, to emerge from the light, as if it were its source and its most perfect expression. It was a figure, humanoid in shape, yet radiating a majesty and a gentle power that transcended any human description. His features were not sharp or easily defined, as if they were composed of the light itself, yet they conveyed an intelligence, a wisdom, and a compassion that were utterly overwhelming. His eyes, if they could be called such, seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, and as they met my awareness, I felt seen, truly seen, not just my actions or my exterior, but the deepest, most hidden parts of my soul. And in that gaze, there was no judgment, no condemnation, only an infinite, unwavering love that was more potent and more real than anything I had ever experienced. I had no doubt, not a flicker of uncertainty, about who stood before me. The name resonated in my spirit without a word being spoken. It was him, the central divine figure, the one whom I had prayed to in hurried battlefield whispers, the one whose teachings I had known in a distant, intellectual way, but whom I had never, ever imagined meeting like this. Awe, so profound it was almost unbearable, washed over me. I felt an instinctive urge to bow, to prostrate myself, not out of fear, but out of an overwhelming sense of reverence and unworthiness in the face of such purity and love. Elias. His voice was not a sound that vibrated through the air, for there was no air, no ears to hear in the conventional sense. It was a direct communication, a knowing that bloomed within my consciousness, clearer and more resonant than any spoken word. It was gentle, yet it carried an authority that was absolute. The sound of my own name, spoken by him, felt like a benediction, a confirmation of my very existence. Before I could even begin to formulate a response, a thought, the experience shifted. The light around us seemed to become a canvas, and upon it, my life began to unfold. It wasn't like watching a movie. It was like reliving it, yet simultaneously observing it with a complete objective understanding. Every moment, from my earliest childhood memories to my final, fatal charge into that alleyway, was replayed. I saw myself as a child, innocent and full of wonder, and then as a young man, full of bravado and a desire to prove myself, choosing the path of a soldier. I witnessed my years in the army, the grueling training, the deployments, the moments of camaraderie, and the stark realities of combat. I saw the good I had done, the times I had acted with courage, protected my comrades, shown compassion even in the harsh environment of war. There were moments of quiet heroism, of selflessness, that I had long forgotten, now replayed with a clarity that brought a surprising warmth. I saw the faces of the men I had served with, the bonds we had forged in the crucible of shared danger, but the life review was unflinchingly honest. It also showed me the other side, the moments I was not proud of. I saw my anger, my impatience, the times my judgment had been clouded by fear or prejudice. I saw the opportunities for kindness I had missed, the moments where duty had hardened my heart, where the dehumanizing nature of conflict had led me to act in ways that, viewed from this new perspective, brought a deep sense of shame and regret. I saw my faith, or rather, the often superficial nature of it. My prayers had been mostly transactional, pleas for protection or victory, rather than a deep, seeking communion. My understanding of his teachings had been simplistic, tailored to fit the stark, moral landscape of a soldier's life. I saw how I had compartmentalized my belief, keeping it separate from the often brutal necessities of my profession, rather than allowing it to inform and transform my actions and motivations at a deeper level. The focus was not on condemnation, but on understanding, on cause and effect, on the motivations behind my actions. The central divine figure remained present throughout this review, his love an unwavering constant, even as I cringed at some of the revelations. It was like being shown a ledger of my soul, not for punishment, but for illumination. The life review wasn't just about my actions. It showed the impact of those actions on others, the ripple effects, both good and bad, that spread out from every choice I had made. I saw the comfort a kind word had brought to a grieving civilian, the fear my aggressive posture had instilled in an innocent bystander, the hope a shared ration had given to a starving child. It was an overwhelming experience to see my life laid bare with such clarity, to understand the true weight of my existence. And through it all, his presence was there, a silent, loving witness, allowing me to see myself as I truly was, in the pure, unfiltered light of his truth. The life review continued, delving deeper not just into my actions but into the very fabric of my beliefs and the state of my soul. It was an unsparing yet compassionate examination. I saw myself in moments of moral compromise, times when the pressures of war and the demands of the mission had led me to blur lines I once thought inviolable. These were not necessarily acts of outright evil, but instances of looking the other way, of choosing the expedient path over the righteous one, of allowing the brutalizing environment to chip away at my core humanity. The review highlighted my interactions with those considered the enemy. I saw the faces of men I had fought, men I had perhaps killed, not as monstrous caricatures, but as individuals, caught in the same terrible machinery of conflict as I was, driven by their own beliefs, fears, and loyalties. From this new vantage point, the stark us versus them mentality that had been so necessary for survival on the battlefield dissolved into a profound and sorrowful understanding of shared human fallibility and suffering. His presence beside me was a constant source of love, yet it did not shield me from the pain of these realizations. It was a pain born of understanding, not of condemnation. He was showing me the truth of my heart, the places where fear, pride, or a hardened spirit had eclipsed the potential for greater love and compassion. Then, the focus of the life review shifted subtly to my spiritual life, or the lack thereof. I saw the missed opportunities for deeper connection with him. My prayers, as I had begun to realize, were often perfunctory, a soldier's appeal for divine intervention in dire straits, rather than a heartfelt yearning for his presence or guidance in the everyday. The rituals of faith I had occasionally participated in felt like empty gestures now, performed out of habit or a vague sense of duty rather than genuine devotion. The central divine figure then began to impart revelations, not through words alone, but through a direct infusion of understanding that bypassed intellect and went straight to my soul. He showed me the nature of true faith, not as a set of rules to be followed or a tribal affiliation, but as a living, breathing relationship with Him, a continuous turning of the heart towards love, truth, and compassion. He revealed that His primary concern was not with my military victories or my adherence to a specific religious code, but with the condition of my soul, with the amount of love I had cultivated and shared. Elias. His communication was gentle but carried an undeniable weight. The uniform you wore, the battles you fought, these were the circumstances of your life. But the true battle was always within, the choice between love and fear, between compassion and indifference, between seeking my light or dwelling in the shadows of human understanding. Visions then began to unfold, illustrating these truths. I saw souls who had lived lives of quiet service, unrecognized by the world, radiating a brilliant inner light because their hearts were filled with love and humility. I saw others who had held positions of great power and religious authority, yet their spiritual forms were dim, constricted by pride and a lack of genuine compassion. It was a profound reordering of my understanding of worth and importance. The values of the world, rank, valor in combat, material success, seemed to fade into insignificance compared to the simple, luminous truth of a loving heart. He showed me that every soul was precious to Him, regardless of nationality, creed, or the side they fought on in earthly conflicts. This was a staggering revelation for a career soldier who had been trained to see the world in terms of allies and enemies. The concept of loving one's enemy, which had always seemed like an impossible, almost naive ideal, suddenly resonated with a profound spiritual logic. It wasn't about condoning harmful actions, but about recognizing the shared spark of divinity within every being, however obscured it might be by hatred or ignorance. The life review wasn't a judgment in the human sense of the word, which often implies punishment. It was more like a diagnostic, a loving and honest assessment designed to facilitate growth and understanding. The regret I felt was not imposed by Him, but arose naturally from my own newfound clarity, from seeing the disparity between what I had been and what I could have been, between my limited understanding and His infinite love. His purpose was not to shame me, but to awaken me, to prepare me for a deeper understanding of the spiritual realities that underpinned all existence. And as this phase of the review concluded, I felt stripped bare, yet strangely hopeful, ready to receive whatever further truths He wished to impart. The immensity of the light seemed to deepen, and with it, my understanding expanded further. The central divine figure began to unveil the spiritual realities that lay behind the curtain of the physical world, particularly concerning the nature of conflict and the forces that drive it. It was as if I were being shown the engine room of human history, the unseen currents that shaped our destinies. He showed me how earthly wars, like the one I had just been fighting in, were often grotesque reflections of deeper spiritual battles. Visions unfolded where I saw not just soldiers with guns, but spiritual entities of darkness, feeding on the fear, hatred, and despair generated by violence. These were the shadowy forms I had briefly glimpsed when I first left my body, now seen with terrifying clarity. They whispered into the hearts of men, fanning the flames of animosity, twisting perceptions, and encouraging division. It was a chilling revelation to see how easily human beings could become unwitting pawns in these larger, unseen struggles, their anger and prejudice amplified and exploited by forces beyond their comprehension. The conflicts you witness on earth, Elias, His communication was imbued with a profound sorrow, are born from a turning away from love, from the source. When hearts are closed to me, they become susceptible to the whispers of darkness, which promise power or vindicate hatred, but lead only to suffering and separation. He then showed me the immense pain this caused Him. It wasn't an angry, vengeful pain, but the deep grief of a loving parent, watching their children inflict wounds upon themselves and each other. His love was so vast that it encompassed all, even those who perpetrated acts of cruelty, and his desire was for all to return to the path of love and reconciliation. This was a radical departure from the image of a partisan deity who might take sides in human wars, a concept that had perhaps lurked in the recesses of my soldier's mind. He revealed that true strength was not found in the ability to dominate or destroy, but in the courage to love, to forgive, and to build bridges even in the face of animosity. He showed me acts of incredible spiritual bravery, individuals who, in the midst of war and hatred, chose compassion, who risked their lives to save an enemy, who refused to succumb to the cycle of vengeance. These acts, often unseen and uncelebrated by the world, shone like brilliant stars in the spiritual firmament, pushing back the darkness. The concept of an enemy, so central to my military life, was being completely dismantled. He wasn't suggesting a naive pacifism that ignored the reality of aggression and the need for protection, but he was revealing a higher truth, that at the soul level, all are interconnected, and that violence against another is ultimately violence against oneself and against the divine fabric that unites all creation. He showed me how prayers, genuinely offered from a place of love and compassion, even for those considered enemies, created powerful ripples in the spiritual realm, strengthening the forces of light and peace. It was a profound call to a different kind of warfare, one fought not with bullets and bombs, but with love, forgiveness, and an unwavering commitment to the highest spiritual principles. This understanding was both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it cast the entirety of my military career, and indeed much of human history, in a new, more tragic light. Liberating because it offered a path beyond the endless cycles of conflict, a vision of a world where the forces of love could ultimately prevail. My previous notions of patriotism, duty, and even justice were being stretched, reevaluated, and deepened. It wasn't that these things were inherently wrong, but that they needed to be subsumed under a higher loyalty to divine love and to the entire family of humanity. The very idea of victory and defeat in earthly terms seemed hollow when viewed from this eternal perspective. The only true victory was the victory of love in the human heart, and the only true defeat was the surrender to hatred and fear. As these profound revelations settled within my consciousness, I felt an overwhelming desire to understand my own role, my own failings, and what, if anything, I could now do. The weight of it all was immense, yet carried within his loving presence, it was a weight that purified rather than crushed. The dialogue with the central divine figure became more direct, more personal, as I struggled to assimilate the vastness of what I was being shown. My mind, still tethered in some way to its earthly patterns of thought, grappled with the implications. Why? The question formed in my consciousness, not a challenge, but a plea for deeper understanding. Why so much suffering, so much darkness, if your love is all-powerful? His response was not a simple answer, but an unfolding of further truth, conveyed with infinite patience and compassion. Elias, love, by its very nature, cannot compel. It invites. The capacity for great love also necessitates the freedom to choose its opposite. The darkness you see is the shadow cast by souls turning away from the light, a consequence of free will misused. Yet, even in the deepest shadow, my light is ever present, ever calling, ever seeking to heal and restore. This concept of free will and its profound consequences resonated deeply. I had seen men make choices on the battlefield, choices for good and for ill, often in moments of extreme pressure. Now I was seeing that principle magnified to a cosmic scale. And what of us, soldiers? I asked, the word feeling strange on my spiritual tongue. Those who fight, who take lives, even in what we believe to be a just cause. Where do we stand in this great unfolding? The heart, Elias, always the heart, he communicated. An action, even a terrible one, committed from a place of perceived necessity to protect the innocent, is judged differently from an action committed from hatred or cruelty. But all violence, All taking of life carries a spiritual weight, a wound upon the fabric of unity. The path to healing lies in acknowledging this weight, in seeking forgiveness, and in striving to transform the impulses that lead to conflict into impulses that lead to peace and understanding, both within oneself and in the world. He then imparted the core of the message he wished for me to understand, and perhaps, eventually, to share. It was a message of radical, unconditional love, a love that transcended all earthly divisions of nation, race, religion, or ideology. It was a call for humanity to awaken to its spiritual interconnectedness, to recognize the divine spark within every individual, even those deemed enemies. The greatest commandment, he emphasized, his essence glowing with an even greater intensity, is to love me with all your heart, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And your neighbor, Elias, is everyone. There are no exceptions in my love, and there should be none in yours. He showed me that true peace would never be achieved through military might or political treaties alone. These might create temporary cessations of hostility, but lasting peace could only be built on a foundation of transformed hearts, on a global upwelling of compassion, forgiveness, and mutual respect. Tell them, Elias. His directive was gentle but unmistakably clear, that the path to true peace begins within each soul. Tell them to lay down the weapons of hatred, of judgment, of fear that they carry in their hearts. Tell them that my love is sufficient to heal all wounds, to bridge all divides, if only they will turn to me and allow it to flow through them. The message was so simple, yet so profound, and so starkly at odds with the complexities and brutalities of the world I had known. It wasn't a political ideology or a strategic plan. It was a spiritual revolution, beginning in the heart of each individual. He then showed me my own potential role, not as a soldier in the earthly sense, but as a messenger, a conduit for this love. The thought was overwhelming. How could I, a man of war, speak of such peace? How could my voice, accustomed to barking orders in the heat of battle, convey such a gentle yet powerful truth? His reassurance was immediate. It is not by your strength, Elias, but by mine. Your experiences, even the harshest ones, have prepared you, have stripped away illusions, and have opened your heart to receive this. Speak what you have seen, what you have felt, what you now know. The words will be given. The sheer responsibility of it was daunting, yet mingled with it was an incredible sense of purpose, a purpose far greater and more meaningful than any I had known before. This was not just a mission, it was a sacred trust. The central divine figure conveyed that my time in this realm of pure light and understanding was drawing to a close. A sense of profound reluctance welled within me. Having experienced this state of absolute peace, love, and clarity, the thought of returning to the broken, chaotic world I had left behind, with its pain, its limitations, and its spiritual blindness, was almost unbearable. I want to stay, the thought, the plea, formed within my consciousness, a silent yearning to remain in his presence forever. His response was filled with an understanding that acknowledged my desire yet affirmed a different path. Elias, your journey in the physical realm is not yet complete. There is work still for you to do, a message you must carry. The peace and love you feel here are not meant to be hoarded, but to be shared, to become a beacon for others who are lost in the darkness. He then showed me, not in a life review, but as a gentle prescience, the potential ripples of my return. He showed me faces of people I did not yet know, souls who were struggling, searching, whose lives might be touched, changed, by the testimony I would bear. He showed me that even a small light, carried faithfully, could dispel much darkness. The reluctance I felt began to transform into a hesitant acceptance, then a burgeoning sense of resolve. The mission he was entrusting to me was not a burden, but an honor, a continuation of service on a far higher plane. You will not be alone, he assured me, his love a tangible force. I will be with you. When you speak my truth, my spirit will speak through you. The strength you need will be provided. The path will be made clear, one step at a time. Then came the gentle but inexorable pull, a sensation of being drawn back, away from the heart of the light. It wasn't a forceful expulsion, but a tender release, like a hand letting go after a long embrace. The brilliance of his presence began to recede, not diminishing, but moving to a different dimension of my awareness, becoming an internalized light rather than an external one. The profound peace and love remained, etched into the very fabric of my soul, an indelible imprint that I knew would never leave me. My last perception in that realm was his voice, his knowing, echoing within me, "Go in peace, and be a bearer of my light. Remember what you have learned. Love, forgive, serve." The transition back was not a gentle reawakening. It was a violent, jarring collision with physicality. One moment, I was bathed in ineffable light and love. The next, an explosion of agonizing sensation. My chest felt like it was being crushed. A desperate, rasping gasp tore through my throat, and the world erupted in a cacophony of harsh sounds and blinding, chaotic light, the frantic reality of a field resuscitation. I could hear shouts, urgent, strained. "We've got a pulse. He's breathing." Strong hands were on me. A mask was clamped over my face. The smell of antiseptic and blood filled my nostrils. My body was a symphony of pain. My chest, my leg, every nerve ending screaming in protest. It was a brutal re-entry into a world I had, for a timeless interval, transcended. Consciousness flickered, a fragile flame in a storm. Through blurry vision, I saw faces hovering above me. Medics, their expressions a mixture of intense concentration and dawning astonishment. I tried to speak, to tell them what I had seen, where I had been, but only a choked groan emerged. The contrast was staggering, almost unbearable. From the boundless peace and love of his presence to this raw, brutal reality of a broken body and the chaos of war. Yet beneath the pain, beneath the confusion, the imprint of that other realm remained, a deep, quiet certainty, an unshakable knowing. I was back, and I had a message. The journey from the battlefield to the field hospital, and then to a larger medical facility, was a blur of pain, medication-induced haziness, and fragmented memories of the light. My body was broken, but my spirit, though reeling from the whiplash of transitioning between realms, felt strangely whole, imbued with a purpose that transcended my physical suffering. The doctors called my survival a miracle. I had been clinically dead for several minutes, my injuries catastrophic. They spoke of lucky shrapnel trajectories, of rapid medical intervention, of the resilience of the human body. I listened, nodded, but I knew the truth was far more profound than medical science could explain. My wife, Sarah, her face a mask of anguish and tearful relief, was flown in. Holding her hand, seeing the love and fear in her eyes, grounded me in the reality of the life I had been given back. But how could I begin to explain to her, or to anyone, what had happened? How could I articulate an experience that was so far beyond the scope of ordinary human language? The initial days were a struggle, not just with physical recovery, but with the immense task of integrating the NDE into my conscious understanding. The memories were vivid, luminous, yet trying to describe them felt like trying to capture sunlight in a jar. The world around me, the hospital room, the concerned faces, even the love of my family, seemed muted, almost two-dimensional, compared to the vibrant, multi-dimensional reality I had witnessed. When I felt strong enough, I tried to speak about it, first to Sarah. I fumbled for words, my voice thick with emotion, recounting the out-of-body experience, the darkness, the overwhelming light, the encounter with him, the life review, the revelations about love and the spiritual nature of conflict. She listened patiently, her hand never leaving mine, her expression a mixture of bewilderment, concern, and a dawning sense of awe. She didn't dismiss it. She knew me, knew I wasn't prone to fantasy or delusion. She saw the profound change in my eyes, in my demeanor. "Elias," she whispered, "whatever happened to you, it was real, wasn't it?" Her acceptance was a balm, a crucial first step. Sharing it with others was more challenging. Some of my military comrades, visiting me, listened with a sort of respectful skepticism. They were soldiers, pragmatic, grounded in the harsh realities of life and death. An NDE, an encounter with a divine figure, it was outside their frame of reference. They attributed it to trauma, to lack of oxygen, to the mind playing tricks under extreme duress. I didn't argue. I understood their perspective. I had once shared it. But their disbelief, however gentle, highlighted the difficulty of the mission he had given me. How could I convey a truth that had to be experienced to be fully understood? The military chaplains were more receptive, yet even they struggled to fit my experience into conventional theological boxes. It was too direct, too personal, too transformative. My internal conflict was immense. My identity as a soldier, which had been my bedrock for 2 decades, was now being challenged by this profound spiritual awakening. The stark simplicities of duty, honor, and mission were now overlaid with far more complex truths about love, forgiveness, and the interconnectedness of all souls. How could I reconcile the man of war with the messenger of peace? The desire to return to the battlefield, to my unit, faded, not out of fear, but out of a profound shift in perspective. The thought of taking another life, even in the name of duty, felt abhorrent. The mission he had given me was of a different order entirely. My recovery was slow, arduous. But with each passing day, as my body healed, my spiritual resolve strengthened. I replayed his words, his revelations, over and over in my mind, seeking to understand their deepest meaning, to prepare myself for the task ahead. The world seemed different now. I saw the pain and fear in people's eyes more clearly, but I also saw their potential for love, their yearning for connection. The message he had given me, about laying down the weapons of the heart, about choosing love over fear, about recognizing our shared divinity, burned within me, an urgent fire. I knew my life could not go back to what it was. I had been to the edge of eternity and returned not just with my life, but with a sacred purpose. The struggle was no longer about survival, but about how to faithfully, effectively, bear the light I had been shown. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential disbelief and misunderstanding, but I was not afraid. I had his promise, "I will be with you," and that was enough. My physical recovery progressed, but the internal transformation was far more significant. The man who had been Sergeant Elias Vance, career soldier, was slowly, irrevocably becoming someone new, someone defined not by rank or combat prowess, but by the luminous truth he now carried. The decision to leave the military was not taken lightly. It was my life, my identity, the only world I had known for 2 decades. But the dissonance between the realities of armed conflict and the message of unconditional love and peace I had received was too profound to ignore. How could I continue to participate in a system that, however necessary it might seem from an earthly perspective, was so often a manifestation of the fear, hatred, and spiritual disconnection he had shown me? It was a painful process, filled with conversations with superiors who didn't understand, with comrades who felt I was abandoning them. But Sarah stood by me, her quiet strength a constant support. She had seen the change in me, the deep, unwavering peace that now resided where once there had been a soldier's restless vigilance. She believed. My new mission began tentatively, informally. I started by sharing my story with small groups, with anyone who was willing to listen, veteran support groups, church gatherings, even just curious individuals. I spoke not as a preacher or a theologian, for I was neither, but simply as a witness, a man who had been to the brink and brought back a message. I recounted my NDE in detail, the darkness, the light, the overwhelming love of the central divine figure, the life review, and the profound revelations about the spiritual nature of existence and the imperative of love. I spoke of the spiritual forces behind earthly conflict, of the need to lay down the weapons of hatred and judgment in our own hearts first. The reactions were varied. Some were deeply moved, tears in their eyes, recognizing a truth that resonated with their own deepest yearnings. They asked questions, shared their own struggles, their own search for meaning. For them, my story was a confirmation, a beacon of hope. Others remained skeptical, attributing my experience to the known effects of trauma and hypoxia. I met their skepticism not with defensiveness, but with the same gentle patience he had shown me. I couldn't force belief. I could only offer my testimony, plant a seed, and trust that the truth would find its own way to fertile ground. Some of the most impactful conversations were with other veterans, men and women who had also seen the face of war, who carried its scars, both visible and invisible. They understood the darkness, the moral ambiguities, the spiritual emptiness that conflict could breed. For some, my message offered a new framework for understanding their experiences, a path towards healing and reconciliation, not just with others, but within themselves. I didn't have all the answers. My understanding was still evolving, deepening, but I held fast to the core of his message. Love is the ultimate reality, the most powerful force in the universe. Forgiveness is essential for ourselves and for others. Peace begins within the individual human heart. Every soul is precious, interconnected, a spark of the divine. I found that the most powerful way to convey this was not through argument or doctrine, but by trying to embody the love and peace I had experienced. It was in listening with compassion, in speaking with honesty and humility, in striving to see the divine in everyone I met, even those who disagreed with me or treated me with hostility. My life was no longer about fighting an external enemy, but about contributing, in whatever small way I could, to the growth of love and understanding in the world. The battlefield had changed from the dusty plains of foreign lands to the often turbulent landscape of the human heart. The mission was far more challenging, yet infinitely more rewarding. As I continue this journey, I often recall his words, "Speak what you have seen, what you have felt, what you now know. The words will be given." And they are. Each time I share my story, I feel his presence, a quiet strength, a gentle guidance. The fear of ridicule or rejection has largely faded, replaced by an urgent desire to share the hope and healing I was so freely given. My life is a testament to the fact that transformation is possible, that even from the depths of violence and despair, the light can emerge, that love is, indeed, stronger than death. And to you, who are listening to this now, perhaps you too are searching. Perhaps you carry your own wounds, your own questions. His message is for you as well. You are loved, unconditionally, infinitely. Seek the light within your own heart. Choose love over fear, compassion over judgment, forgiveness over bitterness. The power to change the world, to bring peace, resides within each of us. It begins with a choice, a turning of the heart. My journey has taught me that faith is not an escape from the world, but a way to engage with it more deeply, more lovingly. It is not about adherence to dogma, but about a living relationship with the divine. I was a soldier, trained for war, but he has called me to be a soldier of peace, armed not with weapons, but with a story, a message of hope, a testament to the enduring power of love. And that is a mission I will serve for the rest of my days.